Non-suing teams have been ordered to share some financial information in NASCAR for the discovery process, and Hendrick Motorsports has been handed a pretty major L1 penalty. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Slurpee, as it was announced on Wednesday afternoon that Slurpee will sponsor Kyle Busch next weekend at the NASCAR Cup Series race at the Chicago Street Course. Slurpee is part of the 7-Eleven brand. 7-Eleven, of course, has already sponsored Kyle Busch this season. That being at Texas Motor Speedway, one of the best races that Kyle Busch put together, until he unfortunately ended up spinning out near the end of the event, but he still recovered to finish inside the top 20. I gotta say, this car looks really, really awesome. I think the RCR knocked this one out of the park, and I think it's really awesome to see that Slurpee is going to sponsor Kyle Busch and for another race. It's another big sponsor coming in, and I think the car looks awesome, and I love seeing new companies coming in, as I don't believe Slurpee's ever sponsored a NASCAR Cup Series car before, so I think this is some really exciting stuff. Pretty cool to see that Slurpee will sponsor Kyle Busch at Chicago. And maybe we'll see more races down the road. I think it'd be pretty exciting if we saw more sponsorship from Slurpee. I think it's awesome. Good to see Kyle Busch has a new sponsor for this upcoming weekend at Chicago. Really exciting stuff. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Atlanta and Lion Rock purses. So every time you have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockrass puts out the purse money for the event. And for the Cup race, it's $11,055,250. For the Xfinity race, it's $1,651,939. And for the Truck race at Lion Rock, it's $782,900. The Cup Series, obviously, because of the charter payouts and agreements that got increased this year, they're making more money than they've ever made at least at any of these races. The Xfinity Series, meanwhile, they've had about as much as they normally get. They get around 1.6 to 1.7 million normally every single race. Meanwhile, the Truck Series continues to struggle getting the purse money they think they're looking for. I wish those numbers were a little bit more up for the Truck Series race, but at least the Xfinity Cup numbers are not that bad, all things considered. But I think they definitely could be a little bit better for sure, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Sonoma NASCAR Xfinity Series race, as they have a title sponsor for the event. The race is going to be called the Pit Boss Food Mass 250. Last year the race is called the Pit Boss Girls 250, and this year it's been changed to the Pit Boss Food Max 250. Last year, of course, Shaman Gizburgen was the driver, picked up the win in the victory in this event. I think he's also going to run that race as well, by the way. I think it's pretty cool to see the Pit Bosses continuing. They're probably going to sponsor Shelter Creek, as they do have a partnership with the Haas Factory team this year. So I expect that that sponsorship will come to play into effect. Nonetheless, really cool to see that Pit Boss is continuing to work closely with the teams. And I think it's cool they'll be sponsoring the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the event. Really exciting stuff. Glad to see that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're unfortunately taking this episode to a sour note, as it was sadly announced on Wednesday that Larry McClure has unfortunately passed away. Larry McClure was 87 years old. For those who do not know, Larry McClure was one of the co-owners of Morgan McClure Racing, a team that had a lot of success in the NASCAR Cup Series in the 1990s, that won 14 races during that span, including a Daytona 500 with Ernie Irvan and 2 Daytona 500s with Sterling Marlin, and nearly won the championship in 1995 as Sterling Marlin finished in third place. This team had a lot of success back in the day. Of course, they no longer exist, unfortunately, as they went away around 2006 to 2007. My thoughts and prayers go out to the McClure family during this time. It's sad when we lose someone in the sport. My thoughts and condolences do go out to the McClure family during an unfortunate time. Larry McClure was 87 years old. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass and announced a couple days ago that the people that will be performing the national anthem are going to be called the Soul Children of Chicago. This is a children's choir group that, of course, I believe is pretty well known in the Chicago area, I'm pretty sure. So it makes a lot of sense to bring someone in a group in that does know the area very, very well. I think it's interesting if they're going to be performing the national anthem. I think it's kind of exciting, though, because usually when you have groups and choirs like this, they're generally a lot better national anthems than when you have like some of the other people that come in and just butcher it quite a bit, which I think is something that's been a problem for the national anthem for quite some time. Nonetheless, I will say it's kind of cool to see they've got a different kind of group coming in and working and doing the national anthem this year. I think that's an exciting part of this news for sure. I think it's pretty cool, and I think it's pretty exciting stuff that they'll be coming in and doing this pretty cool stuff and pretty exciting stuff that they'll get the opportunity to perform the national anthem. Really great stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mobile One. As there was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that Mobile One has an integrated ad buy with the CW for Xfinity coverage to sponsor segments for 5 races in 2025, starting next weekend at the Chicago Street Course. They did not exactly say which races that they are going to be doing this outside of Chicago. I'm a little surprised they're not doing it for Atlanta, considering Atlanta is one of the biggest when it comes to TV ratings for all these events. But I think it just shows that the CW is growing their presence. They're picking up big sponsorship on the TV side of things for Mobile One. I think that's a really, really exciting factor there. And I think that seeing Mobile One expanding their presence in the sport is also a really, really huge deal. Could they be involved in the sport, maybe becoming a premier partner down the road? That's something very interesting to look at. Nonetheless, so I think it's really cool to see something like this going down. Pretty nice to see, and great to see Mobile One stepping up their sponsorship for the year. I think it's really great, and I think it's cool to see that they're doing this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ben Mayer. As it was announced on Wednesday that Ben Mayer will make his NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series debut this weekend at Landmark Park, as he'll drive the 02 truck for Young's Motorsports. For those who do not know who Ben Mayer is only 16 years old, but this driver is very, very talented. He currently leads the Cars Tour Late Model Championship, I believe, on the West, and is leading the championship in the PLM Series at this moment at just 16 years old. I don't know how much experience Ben Mayer has on the road course side of things, but you can definitely tell this guy has a lot of potential from racing in the Cars Tour. So I think Ben Mayer could have a decent chance of maybe contending maybe for a top 30 or something like that, because the field is really, really stacked for this weekend. You've got Cam Waters running the Truck Series race. You've got Jordan Taylor running it. You've got Brent Cruz, Thomas Annunziata. You've also got Josh Walicki running this weekend. You've also got some other drivers that are running this weekend as well, like of course your full-time guys like Corey Heim, Chandler Smith, Lane Riggs, Roger Carruth. The field is really, really stacked for the Truck Series race, which is something I haven't really been able to say much throughout the year so far. But I think if anyone could step up to the plate and do a really, really good job, it's Ben Mayer. We'll see what it can do. It could be one of the better runs we've seen from that team. We'll see how we do, and hopefully Ben Mayer can do a really good job, because honestly, I think if he can do a good job, that could be really good for his future. Great opportunity to see what he can do this weekend at Lime Rock in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Hopefully he can do a really strong and really, really great job. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Quarterley. As it was announced and confirmed on Wednesday that Dale Quarterley will be back in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2025, as he'll drive the number 32 for NDS Motorsports this weekend in the Craftsman Truck Series race at Lion Rock Park. Dale Quarterley is someone who's very experienced on road courses and has made road course starts in NASCAR competition, I believe going all the way back to the late 2000s, I'm pretty sure, and in the early 2010s as well. And also, I believe we'll be running the ARCA race as well on Saturday. This is going to be a really interesting opportunity because I think Dale Quarterley could do a really solid job with this team. Now, I'm not sure how good the equipment is going to be, but I definitely trust the talent of Dale Quarterley. I think he does have a lot of potential to be very, very successful because I think it's going to be a very chaotic and wild race for sure. So I hope Dale Quarterley can show some really good speed and have a lot of success. I think this is a really good opportunity to be back in NASCAR truck competition. I'd have to say this probably won't be the only time we see Dale Quarterley. Would not be surprised if we see him run Watkins Glen and also run the road, because when we see road courses on the schedule, I think if Dale Quarterley means someone who could come out here and try to race these events. Pretty cool stuff to see that Dale Quarterley, though, is getting the chance and opportunity to race in the Craftsman Truck Series once again. I think it's a really strong and really great opportunity to see him back in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2025. Really awesome and really exciting stuff to see this for sure. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carlos Sainz Sr. As Carlos Sainz Sr. confirmed on Wednesday afternoon that he will not be running for president of the FIA at the end of this year. This year, there will be a new election for the FIA president, and Mohammed Ben Sulayem, who is not really well liked by a lot of people in Formula One, among drivers and many people in the industry as well. Many people want to see a new president come in, and Carlos Sainz Sr. had thrown his name, I believe, back a couple months ago. We talked about this on the channel, where he had thrown his name as someone who could potentially run for potential president of the FIA. But I think there's a lot of reasons why Carlos Sainz Sr. does not want to run the FIA. I think he understands that there is a lot of pressure being the president of the FIA, and I think there's also a lot of people that think that are worried that if he comes in and makes a bad decision, decision that he's probably not going to do a really good job accepting that, which I disagree. I think Carlos Sainz Sr. could really handle that pressure. But I will say this about Carlos Sainz Sr. I think it'd been really awesome to see him, of course, with his son, so racing in Formula One at this point. It would have been really awesome if he got the chance and opportunity to be the president of the FIA, because I think he would have been able to go in there and make a lot of really good decisions. But I think if you understand the pressure and you can't handle it, I completely understand. But I would have definitely loved seeing him get the chance and opportunity to be the guy who could have been the president of the series. So we'll see what happens down the road on who is going to be the FIA president. Most likely over Carlos Sainz Sr. dropping out, unless they can get someone that's really universally liked. I think Mohammed bin Sulayem is going to continue being the president of the FIA long term. I think there needs to be a lot of changes that need to happen in the FIA for the sport to be successful long term. I just think that there's a lot of things they're doing currently at the moment that are not perfect for Formula One, and they're not making the best decisions out there for the sport's long-term future of Formula One. So we'll see what happens in the not-so-distant future on who could potentially take over from Mohammed if Mohammed doesn't continue past this year. But as of right now, the plan is that they are not going to be changing things at the moment, and I think that Mohammed's probably going to win the election. As of right now, we won't be seeing Carlos Sainz go and run for president of the FIA, which is really unfortunate. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about ECUs. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Wednesday afternoon, the NASCAR has added tests for a new ECU for 2026. For those who don't know, the ECUs are developed by McLaren, which of course McLaren is known for Formula One among other things. They're going to be having new tests for new electric cooling unit that is going to be coming in 2026. On October 20th, they'll be doing a test at the Charlotte Roval, and then on November 17th, later that year at the end of the season, they'll be having a test on the Charlotte Oval. Now, the drivers have not been announced who will be part of this ECU test. This electronic cooling unit is something new that is coming in for a couple big reasons. Number one, there's a lot of talk about BOP. There's also a lot of talk about a potential new manufacturer coming in, and NASCAR has been starting to do a lot of different things to try to potentially get that set up. There's been a lot of talk about maybe some sort of hybridization coming into NASCAR in the future, and I talk about BOP as something down the road because if Honda comes in, they're going to have some sort of change to the engine formula, maybe like multiple different engines out there, which could lead to BOP being a major factor. I think when you look at something like this, when you're starting to hear more about this a lot, I think it's something to pay attention to. Now, no, the NASCAR Cup Series is not going electric, so if you're looking at ECU, they're just testing the ECUs to get everything set up and ready to go for 2026 on these next-gen cars. I think it's certainly interesting. It'll be something to pay attention to as time progresses and goes on, and we'll see more information on that, I think, really soon, but I'm intrigued to see what happens with this as time goes on. Very much looking forward to see if things could be implemented, which Bob knows it will not be an increase in horsepower, which I think that's an unfortunate factor coming in with this, but it'll be something to pay attention to for sure going forward. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Flow Racing. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that there will be more races from Flow Racing that will be simulcasted on NASCAR's Fast Channel. As it was announced on Wednesday that Flow Racing will simulcast 7 live events on NASCAR's Fast Channel throughout the remainder of 2025. Some notable events: the ARCA West Race at Sonoma will be simulcasted on the NASCAR Fast Channel. The Valley Star Credit Union 300 at Martinsville, one of the biggest late model races of the year. Snowball Derby qualifying, which of course is one of the biggest late model races of the year as well. Though the Snowball Derby will not be televised on the Fast Channel, which I think they probably should televise the Snowball Derby because I watched it last year. I think it's one of the best late model races in the country and one of the best races I've watched in the last couple of years. About other big events as well, I think a couple Bowman Gray races are there. I think the season finale for that, and I think some ACT late model races are also going to be part of that as well. I think that NASCAR's partnership with Flow Racing has continued to grow, and I think that when you look at this in general, in a nutshell, I really do believe that Flow Racing and NASCAR are going to continue building up that partnership, and I think you're going to see more and more events showing up on that network in the not-so-distant future with the NASCAR Fast Channel growing as well. NASCAR wants to continue building up that network. They've been talking about adding more live events. I think down the road also, you might be seeing some more of those ARCA West races and the ARCA East races going on. They're thinking in the future that could be a full-time thing where all the ARCA East and West races end up on that platform. And I think there's some other things that could come into play in the not-so-distant future. So we'll see what happens in regards to this, and we'll see what happens in regards to some potential moves on that front. Nonetheless, so I think it is certainly interesting. We'll keep an eye on this as time progresses and goes on, and we'll see what races do end up on there. But I think it's pretty exciting and cool to see that a lot of the races from Flow Racing will get the chance and opportunity to be on the NASCAR Fast Channel throughout 2025. I think it's interesting and pretty awesome, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Amazon Prime. Now, we've talked a lot about the ratings from Amazon Prime in 2025, but a couple days ago on Wednesday, Amazon Prime released some interesting data and information in regards to some of their numbers for the year that they have gathered in regards to data. The average age is one of the big things we've talked about when it comes to their ratings, and according to them, they had a 56.1 average age for NASCAR Cup Series races on Amazon Prime, which is down 6 years from 2000 from the races that have been on Fox, which the average age is 62 to 63. They've dropped 50 to 56 years old. Some other notable things is how many people are tuning into the post race. According to them, an average of 931,000 people tuned in to the post race, which for average, that's about 50% of the audience, which is about 43 to 44% of the average audience that watch a NASCAR Cup Series event. And finally, another big one. 47 laps of green flag was the average of the final run where they did not run a single commercial at all, whether it was side-by-side or full screen, especially a late race restart where they would not throw a full screen commercial. I think the Amazon Prime's coverage this year was awesome. I think that there are some things they definitely could work on. I don't think there's any denying that. You can obviously do a lot better. But Amazon Prime, you look at the average age. NASCAR is going toward the streaming side of things. I think they knew that they were going to lose a lot of people in that older demographic, but they sacrificed that to try to get a lot of younger fans. That's what the NFL did when they went to Amazon. They dropped their numbers about 6 or 7 years in the first year, and now their numbers are starting to rival even some of their big TV networks like Fox and even NBC as well for some of their games. I think that Amazon Prime is going to continue to grow its presence, and I think NASCAR might be able to attract some of those younger fans that could come over to TNT for this weekend in particular. I think that the biggest thing is a younger audience and the lack of commercials. We saw less and less we saw barely any full screen commercials at all, and none during the green flag. And we also, near the end of the races, basically for like the last 20% of the race or something like that, sometimes they wouldn't even show a full screen commercial, which is a really, really big deal. So I think in a nutshell, Amazon Prime is setting itself up for the long term, and I think there's a lot of positive things to look at from Amazon Prime's coverage in 2025. I think they've done an excellent and a really good job with that coverage this year, and I think there should be a lot of things to be taken away on a positive front and a positive aspect as well. I think their coverage was great, and I think it was really fantastic. Good to see that their coverage this year was as good as it was, and I think the numbers for this year are really solid, considering that they were expected to lose a number of people in the coverage this year. I think there's a lot of good things to look at from it, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mike Joy. As it was announced that Mike Joy will be part of the truck broadcast at Lime Rock Park for Fox. Now, many of you would be thinking, oh, so Mike Joy is going to be calling the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Fox, and they're going to be at the racetrack at Lime Rock, right? Not necessarily. Jonathan Fell noted this on Twitter, and I was really disappointed to hear this news, that Jamie Little, Michael Waltrip, and Trevor Bayne will be in the broadcast booth for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Fox. Mike Joy will be part of the broadcast in some way, shape, or form. Probably some sort of opening for the race, but not going to be really much doing stuff with the broadcast in general. When I heard this news, I was really disappointed because for me, Mike Joy should be calling this NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Lime Rock. But Fox, for some weird reason, has an obsession putting Jamie Little in the booth. Look, Jamie Little is a fantastic pit reporter. I think her on Pit Road, she is exceptional and she is phenomenal. But here is the major problem. She is not cut out to be a lead commentator. She is very slow with her words. She does not bring the energy and the excitement. Listen to the way that Adam Alexander calls races. Listen to the way Lee Diffie calls races. Those two know how to call races. They know in the moment. They bring the energy. They bring the excitement. Jamie Little doesn't have that. And it doesn't help that they've also got Michael Waltrip in the booth. Look, Michael Waltrip needs to go before Jamie Little. Michael Waltrip has been so bad. There's been some times where I just question why he's even there in the first place, and he just is not a good co-commentator there. Trevor Bayne is fine. I think Trevor Bayne is okay, and he honestly has done a decent job on pit road. But I think that Phil Parsons should be over there in all honesty, because Phil Parsons is a lot better than some of the people that are in that booth currently at the moment. I think in a nutshell, the fact that Mike Joy cannot call the race this weekend, and maybe even having Kevin Harvick there, is something they probably should have done, because I just cannot understand why in the world you would have Jamie Little call in this race. Like, I don't understand. It's probably going to be remote too, which is really unfortunate. But can we get NASCAR Productions to take over the coverage? Because Fox's truck races have been really, really bad. But I just don't understand why Mike Joy, if you're bringing Mike Joy out there, you're like, oh, Mike Joy's going to be there. Nope, he's not going to be there calling the race. He's going to be there doing some sort of pre-stuff for the event, which I think is just really, really unfortunate, because you had such a great opportunity to get a massive, massive dub for your network, and instead you burn yourself down and make a terrible and really, really bad decision here, Fox. And this is another prime example of Fox not listening to the fans and doing whatever they want. It frustrates me, it irritates me, and it irks me that they just don't care. They had a great opportunity here, and they floundered it, and they squandered it by not putting Mike Joy in the booth. Mike Joy should have been in the booth this time around, and for some weird and strange reason, he wasn't, and I don't understand. It's a bad decision, and it's a bad call from Fox to not have Mike Joy in that booth. I really hope he gets to do some stuff in the future, because Mike Joy's not going to be around forever at this point calling races, so I wish he would have been able to call a race at Lime Rock with the history he has, but instead we got to deal with Jamie Little calling the race very boringly and not very good. I don't expect the coverage to be good. I don't think it's going to be good for Fox, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the driver ambassador program. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Wednesday, that according to him, according to sources that have told him, Joey Logano has won the first term of NASCAR's driver ambassador program, which means that Joey Logano will win $1 million for this year. Noted in there, the top 5 are Joey Logano, Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, Ross Chastain, and Daniel Suarez. Joey Logano winning does not surprise me. Joey Logano has actually been doing a lot of stuff. I know people are going to say, oh, Joey Logano is a pundit. Joey Logano works for the sport, and basically someone that's getting paid. Joey Logano has done a lot of stuff off the racetrack. He's been on a lot of podcasts. Of course, he does help with SiriusXM NASCAR Radio with there, and that's probably helps a little bit. But he's been also on some pretty big shows like First Take on ESPN, and he's done a lot of stuff outside of the sport. Say what you want to say about Joey Logano. Joey Logano may not be the nicest guy on the racetrack, but for what a lot of people say, Joey Logano is really, really good to listen to off the racetrack. Even if I don't agree with all his takes, Joey Logano is someone I can appreciate that does maybe want to grow the sport and make it a little bit better. And going out and doing this and trying to compete for this doesn't surprise me. Now, Kyle Larson, he's also doing a lot of stuff. There's big the DAP points, and I know Larson was talking kind of smack at Logano during when he was doing Indy 500 stuff. Also, Logano was on the broadcast for Fox for IndyCar at one point. But I think for Larson being second, that's a really good thing. Ryan Blaney being third, Blaney did some stuff, went out and did some things, and then you had Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez. I think both went on TV shows. Suarez went out to promote Mexico. I think Chase Elliott was not in the. I think Elliott was in the top 10. I think he did some production for Mexico and some other talk shows as well. In a nutshell, I think this driver ambassador program, what it's done, has been able to create some really great opportunities here for these drivers to go out and promote the sport, which is what NASCAR needs to do. They need to get the younger fans to tune in, and they need to get the sport promoted on social media, among other things as well, because that's been one thing about the drivers, because we don't really have any superstars currently at the moment. I mean, your biggest superstar right now is, in my opinion, is Kyle Larson, but Larson's not really well known to the masses. I know he's got a connection with Prime and KSI Logan Paul, and they do promote him from time to time, but they don't promote him like some of the other people, and I think if they promoted Kyle Larson the way I think they should, I think that Kyle Larson could become that next big superstar. Because Chase Elliott, he's a superstar on the NASCAR side of things, but outside of NASCAR, how many people know who Chase Elliott is? That's one of the reasons why this DAP program really came into play and really came into light. I think it's interesting, and I think there's some cool stuff around having a program like this, and I think there's some very good stuff to come out from something like this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Red Bull. And now we did a video covering the story on the channel on Wednesday morning, but it was announced that Red Bull will sponsor both Shaman, Gizburgen, and Connor Zilisch in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the Chicago Street Course. Shaman Gizburgen will make his first NASCAR Xfinity Series start of 2025 next weekend at the Chicago Street Course, driving a number 9 car, while Connor Zilisch, of course, is full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and will drive the 88 car in that event. This is also going to be the first time we're going to see not one, but two Red Bull cars on the racetrack competing against each other. This is some really exciting news, and pretty great to see that Red Bull will be sponsoring an Xfinity competition. This is going to be the first time, as someone noted in my comments section a couple days ago, but it was basically noted that this will be the first time that Red Bull will have sponsorship in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition, I believe, since 2009 or 2010. So it's been almost a decade and a half since the last time Red Bull has some association with the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, when you look at the two guys they associate with, they're both part of the Red Bull Racing family, but the other big thing to kind of look at this as well is the fact that both drivers have had quite a bit of success in their racing careers in recent weeks. Connor Zilisch, of course, picked up his first oval win. Yes, it technically is a triangle, but he won his first oval win, got his first ever oval win in NASCAR competition in the Xfinity Series by winning the race at Pocono. And Connor Zilisch has been continuing to improve. Now, he's going to be going up against a guy, though, in this event, and I think these are the two odds-on favorites to win. If Brock Feeney does show up to the race, maybe we see him become an odds-on favorite for this event. But I do think that Shaman, Gizburgen, and Connor are going to be the two head-to-head guys going for the overall win and victory at the race, because both of them are fantastic at road courses, but Shaman Gizburgen's been so good at Chicago. He won the Xfinity Series race in that number 97 car. I believe that was his third and final win of the season, I'm pretty sure, and he could be looking to pick up that fourth win. He's also going to be looking to sweep the weekend, as Shaman Gizburgen will be looking to get his second win of 2025 in Cup and his third career NASCAR Cup Series victory, and trying to become the first driver to win two races at Chicago, which just also could be the final Chicago Street Course race we end up seeing. But I think what's so cool about this is the Red Bull partnership and the growth of Red Bull as well in the sport. I would have to think down the road you are going to see Red Bull increase their partnership with a team like Trackhouse Racing going into the future, because they're going to sponsor Connor Zilisch in two more races, and maybe Red Bull becomes a full-time sponsor if Connor Zilisch moves up, which there is a ton of talk and conversation that Connor Zilisch is going to move up to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2026. There's a lot of talk he might replace Daniel Suarez going into next year, and as Connor continues to improve in the Xfinity Series the way he's been improving on the ovals and even on the road courses at this point. And of course, he's going to run Watkins Glen in the Cup Series race in about a month or so from now. So I'd have to think that you're going to see these two compete for that overall win as well. But I think that this matchup between Zilisch and Shaman Gizburgen is going to be incredible. I think it's going to be one of the best races we've seen this year. These two are so good at the racing craft. They're both talented. They're capable. They're very, very good. And I expect that with this partnership as well, I do expect that we're going to see some really cool stuff coming out from this. I think both are going to be fast. I think they're both going to be strong. And I think both have a fantastic chance and a really strong opportunity to pick up the win. They're both really great at road courses. I do expect both to be really strong and really, really good at the Chicago Street Course. Excited to see what both can do. We'll see how they do at the Chicago Street Course in next week. I think it's going to be fun to see how those two end up performing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Niss Motorsports. Now, there has been a ton of talk and conversation surrounding the future of Niss Motorsports and whether or not they could be a team that switches the Ram in 2026. Well, Niss Motorsports and a spokesperson from the team have confirmed they will not be switching to Ram in 2026. They basically said, we've seen the rumors that have been circulating over the course of the last few weeks since the rumors of Ram coming back have been coming around, and we want to confirm that we are not going to be one of the teams that is switching to the Ram program in 2026. And they have a long-term commitment with Chevy, and they will continue staying with Chevrolet from 2026 and beyond. One of the reasons why I believe that Niss Motorsports have been noted as an association is because of the Trackhouse Racing connection. Many people think that Trackhouse Racing, including myself, might switch over to Dodge in 2027. If they do, of course, end up coming into the Cup Series, which it sounds like there's a very likely possibility they could have a Cup Series program as early as 2027. But with their association with Chevrolet continuing, I think that's good for Niss Motorsports. But I think if they would have switched to Dodge, I really do believe that their team could have taken that next next major step. They could have been a Tier 1 organization and a Tier 1 team, which I think would have been really, really good for their organization and their product as well. Because Niss Motorsports, they're a solid team. There's no denying that. Caden Honeycutt has been really good with that team this year. Rosh Hussein showed some really, really good speed. They've got Josh Flicky this weekend at Lime Rock. They've got a lot of really good talent behind the wheel of their cars. But I really do believe that if they would have gone to Dodge, I think they could have taken that major step and next level. Because Niss Motorsports, they've not been really a championship caliber team since Carson Osbar was with the program a couple years ago. And now Carson, of course, is driving for Spire, so you're never going to see him back in a Niss Motorsports truck ever again, most likely. So now the big question is, if Niss Motorsports is not going over there, who is going to end up over at Ram next year? To be honest, I'm not really sure. There's a lot of speculation that GMS Racing might be switching and coming back next year to NASCAR competition, and they could be one of the teams that is switching over to Ram. There's been a lot of talk that they may be one of the organizations that might be looking to come in, which I think is certainly a major, major possibility that they might come in and be part of that. I also look at some other organizations as well. There's been a lot of rumors that Cletus McFarlane could be coming up to truck competition. Cletus has denied these rumors. I know that this Dodge CEO, Tim Kuklinis, who's owner of Ram, he's talked about maybe these rumors may not be true about Cletus coming in, but he's probably going to be looking at Cletus McFarlane. There's been rumors that Rhett Jones Racing could potentially switch over to Dodge and come back to truck competition, but they've kind of denied that. I think the GMS rumors are kind of there. There's also rumors of CR7 Motorsports. Some have suggested that CR7 Motorsports could be one of the teams that does switch over to the Ram program for 2026. That's a team that I think could really, really use that. CR7 is a team that's good, but they're not setting the world on fire at this moment. And Grant Enfinger, I think, is a lot better than what that equipment has shown. So I think if you got Grant Enfinger to be with Dodge, I think he'd instantly be a championship contender. There's been a lot of talk about ThorSport Racing, and I can definitely tell you that ThorSport Racing, to my understanding, they are not switching over to Dodge at this moment or the Ram program. So I think you're going to be looking at some other things. And some have suggested maybe Tony Stewart could get involved, which Tony has denied multiple times that he does not want to come back to NASCAR, which is extremely understandable at this point. But I think Niss not going over is definitely throwing a wrench in some things. So the big question is which teams are going to switch over. Because if you're going to use Cletus McFarlane as a full-time driver, and then you're going to get a team like GMS and you're going to put Spencer Gallagher behind the wheel, I'm sorry, your manufacturer is not going to be serious. So they need to get a team that is serious, that's already involved in the Craftsman Truck Series, and they need to get drivers who are involved, who are really, really good at this kind of stuff. So we'll see what happens into the future, what happens here, what teams do switch over to that new Dodge program coming into the Truck Series and the Ram program as well. We'll see what happens down the road, but as of right now, we don't officially know what's going to happen in the future, and we'll see what goes on and what teams could switch over to the Ram program in 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports. As it was announced on Wednesday, we covered a story on the channel, it was announced that Hendrick Motorsports has been handed some pretty massive penalties in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. As the number 17 car's Xfinity Series program, the one that we have seen Kyle Larson win in this year, William Byron win, and Chase Elliott show good speed, they unfortunately got handed a pretty massive penalty. And the reason they got a penalty is because they had a violation in the rear conical receiver, which I believe is in the rear of the car, if I'm not mistaken. You're not supposed to touch that part of the car, I'm pretty sure, and that is one of the rules in the NASCAR Xfinity Series rulebook. Because of this penalty, they have received a 40 owner point penalty. They have lost 10 playoff points, so both of the wins they've already had so far this year, bye-bye, those are completely gone. And they also received a $40,000 fine. In addition to that, Adam Wall, the crew chief for this program, has been suspended for 3 races, which I would expect that, I don't know if that goes into effect for the 3 races that he is going to enter, or if it's just 3 NASCAR Xfinity Series races. Now, this is a pretty significant penalty for the NASCAR Xfinity Series because that 17 car has been really fast and really strong in 2025. Like I mentioned a second ago, we have seen that car win 2 races in Xfinity competition. Kyle Larson won the Xfinity Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway. They led 276 or 277 of the 300 laps in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And then, of course, you do have William Byron, who won the NASCAR Xfinity race at Charlotte. And you could argue that Kyle Larson should have won the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Homestead, as he got a terrible push by Sam Mayer, got pushed up the racetrack, and he absolutely should have won the race. He kind of got screwed by Sam Mayer on getting that win, that being Kyle Larson. And we've seen Corey Day get behind the wheel of that car in recent weeks, and I've seen a lot of improvement from Corey Day. He finished inside the top 10, showed some really being fantastic and really, really good speed in the event. And I think that in a nutshell, when you look at that team, they've been really getting better as an organization as they've won the most races they've ever had in a season. But now you've got this team getting in trouble for cheating a little bit. And it's unfortunate because, again, you have these violations that do come into effect, and it really affects the potential performance of an organization, a team like Hendrick Motorsports on the Xfinity side. And this is now the second time in the last couple of years we've seen Hendrick Motorsports get some sort of penalty. Remember, they got a pretty big penalty for Lubricate back in 2023 for all four of their cars in the NASCAR Cup Series for Alex Bowman, William Byron, Kyle Larson, and Chase Elliott. All four drivers got handed massive L2 penalties, I'm pretty sure, and they all got to go and appeal it, which they kind of won their appeal a little bit. They got all their points back, but they basically still got massive fines. I think they doubled the fine from $100,000 to $200,000 for each team, and I think that Hendrick had to, of course, pay for that. I don't think the drivers had to pay for it. What's disappointing here is that the drivers shouldn't be hated for this. I've seen people kind of saying, oh, Chase Elliott should be getting backlash for this, or like Kyle Larson should be getting backlash for this. No, they're the guys who drive the cars. The guys who drive the cars, they're not the ones that should be getting any sort of criticism here because they're the ones that are getting behind the wheel and performing in these race cars. They're not the ones that are basically messing with the parts of the cars, which again, next gen, you mess with these parts, this would have been a more major penalty because it's the Xfinity Series, though. It's not as big of a penalty as it absolutely could have been, but this is still a significant penalty for the Xfinity side of things because the Hendrick Motorsports car, like I mentioned, has been super fast and really, really strong. And getting a penalty like this could have major, major implications and effects on many things, like the owner's points, for example. You think about the 17 car. That car doesn't have a massive amount of owner's points as it is right now. I think they're in the top 20 before this. I think they've fallen outside the top 20 in the owner's points, but they're not eligible, of course, to run for the owner's championship because they haven't run every single race. You have to run every single race to be eligible to run for the owner's championship. But I think for Hendrick Motorsport, they added that race at Pocono for a reason, to try to find some advantages and get that car better, and also some stuff that Junior Motorsports can make, considering that I believe that Hendrick car is prepared by Junior Motorsports, if I'm not mistaken, and they've been using that car as a potential guinea pig to try to figure out some advantages that they could use. In a nutshell, this is still a very significant penalty for the Xfinity Series because, like I mentioned before, we want to see these teams have a lot of success, and I think innovation is really important, but there's also a rulebook that you do have to follow. If you mess with that rulebook in any way, shape, or form, you're likely going to get a penalty, and it's unfortunate for a team like Hendrick, but Hendrick's also got a lot of money currently at the moment, and I think there was a major question on if they were going to appeal it, which I do not believe they're going to appeal it at this time. I think their main focus going forward is going to be trying to have a lot of success in NASCAR competition. They got a lot of races coming up in Xfinity. They've got Corey Day running the remainder of the races this year with this team in that number 17 car, and I think that's the main focus for that team going forward right now, is to try to focus on having a lot of success in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and trying to win as many races as possible. So, pretty significant penalty here, a really, really big deal that they got handed a massive penalty on this front, and I think it's a big deal that that group gets handed a really big penalty that could affect the program. When it comes to performance, Adam Wall being gone for 3 weeks is a big deal. I'd have to think Kevin Mendering, who I believe is still with the program, is likely going to be the crew chief for the next few races for Corey Day. We'll see what happens going forward, because there's people saying, oh, Adam Wall should replace Alan Gustafson. Well, now you got Adam Wall is getting in trouble, which Chad Knaus does play a role in this car as well, so Chad's hands are helping making maybe some cheating stuff. Nonetheless, a pretty big penalty for Hendrick and a huge penalty on that front, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about the 2311 Racing versus Front Row Motorsports NASCAR lawsuit. Now, we did a video covering the story on the channel on Wednesday, but there's been a lot of updates in regards to the 2311 and Front Row Motorsports NASCAR lawsuit. The big story came out on Wednesday. The judge in the case, Kenneth Bell, has ordered the non-suing teams that are not suing NASCAR currently at the moment to provide financial information in the manner of the discovery process for NASCAR. NASCAR wanted a lot of information from all the teams that were not suing NASCAR to try to help their case against 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. All 12 of those teams, the only team that basically has provided the financial information that they basically were giving out was Colleague Racing. That's the only team that's not part of this, but a lot of other organizations were required to give out financial information. Teams like Hendrick Motorsports with drivers like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, William Byron, and Alex Bowman. Teams like Joe Gibbs Racing with Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin, Ty Ty Gibbs and Chase Briscoe. Other organizations like Trackhouse and Rocha St. Daniel Suarez and Shane Van Gisbergen, among other teams like RFK Racing, Ryan Priest, Chris Buescher, and Brad Keselowski, among other organizations that were basically part of this. They were asking for a ton of financial information. They were asking for the contract salaries. They were asking Hendrick Motorsports on how much they made on that Garage 56 entry, and also how much they made on the Indy 500 side of things as well. Now, the judge basically said that we're not going to grant as much information as they want. NASCAR wanted all the information on the contracts, but the teams had said during the hearing, I believe it was on Tuesday, I'm pretty sure, they said that if all the information the NASCAR wanted had gotten out into the public, it could have been catastrophic and it could have been devastating. The reason that they didn't want all this information going out is because the other organizations and teams don't want drivers to know how much they are making. They don't want, like for instance, Hendrick Motorsports, they don't want to know how much Chris Bell is making at Joe Gibbs Racing. For instance, Joe Gibbs Racing doesn't want to know, it would get out how much that Kyle Larson makes at Hendrick Motorsports or Chase Elliott makes at Hendrick Motorsports for that matter. And they don't want that. Also, sponsorship side of things, they don't want to know how much the sponsors are paying for each of these organizations and teams. So I think that it's a win, at least, that not all the information is going to have to go out and be received at this time. But I think this is a little bit of a betrayal to those organizations and teams because they didn't want to be part of this lawsuit. They did not want to. I thought maybe they would, but they do not want to be part of the lawsuit in any way, shape, or form. And they're getting forced to share a ton of information that they really did not want to share at this particular moment. And they really were forced to in the discovery process. I get it's legal stuff that comes into play, and I get the legal stuff has to come into play here, but I think NASCAR is being a little overburdened because that's getting sent to the lawyers, and they'll have to share it. So you have these teams that are being ordered to basically get involved in something that they did not want to get involved in, and I know they're not happy about getting involved in a legal case they really did not want to get involved in any way, shape, or form. So I think that at least it's a win that they basically don't have to share all the financial information, but they're still being forced to share some of the financial information that they probably didn't want to share at this particular moment in time, which I find to be a little bit unfortunate. They're being forced to share some of that information, but it's not also shocking and surprising because it's part of the legal proceedings in the legal case at this moment. There's also more information that came out. Now, yesterday there was supposed to be a hearing between, I believe, Doug Bowles and IndyCar. I believe Bob Pockers noted that hearing has been held off a little bit with the discovery process still going on. There's supposed to be 650 pages of documents that were supposed to be presented. Doug Bowles is supposed to be subpoenaed into court, and he's supposed to go in and share a lot of information. That has been held off at this moment as more is happening at the moment right now. So that case will probably be pushed back probably a couple weeks down the road. They're still worrying about the appeal, among other things as well. Now, Steve Phelps, for the first time, we haven't really heard Steve Phelps talk a lot about this lawsuit, but Steve Phelps had an interview with, I believe it was someone from CNBC, I'm pretty sure. I think it was like Brian Marshall, someone from CNBC. He spoke about the case in a pretty big way and said that he really doesn't understand why we're at this point right now between 2011 and Front Row and NASCAR with this lawsuit. He feels like that NASCAR is giving out a lot more benefits and a lot more money with the charters this year. They said there was a 73% increase in the revenue they're getting, which is the first time we've heard an increase in the revenue for everybody involved. And he also reveals some of the other information and revenues as well. He says that he doesn't really understand why that all these teams are currently suing him at this moment. Obviously, with the 2011 Racing and Front Row Motorsports NASCAR lawsuit, this is a slight loss for 2011 and Front Row that some of the information that NASCAR was wanting was able to be obtained, but it's also a win because they couldn't get all the information that they really, really wanted. And it also likely means that the non-suing teams don't have to fully get involved with the lawsuit anymore going forward. But I think that forcing the teams that are non-suing at this time to share some of that information, I think that's a little bit overburdened on NASCAR's part. I think they're overstretching their boundaries on how much that they can do here. And I think you're going to have some of those teams, they're going to get more and more upset with NASCAR. I mean, a lot of these teams are already frustrated with NASCAR as it is. They were not a big fans of the negotiations and the way how negotiations went altogether. And there was a lot of tension that happened behind the scenes. That's why there was a lot of talk about some of the other teams joining up with the lawsuit, which NASCAR said, if you join up with the lawsuit in any way, shape, or form, you're very, very likely we're probably going to take your charters away altogether. Many thought that NASCAR was bluffing at that point, but I think there definitely was that possibility that they could have done that, which would have been really, really devastating if they weren't given that chance and opportunity to basically, go and get involved in the lawsuit, because I think the teams now, they're probably regretting not getting involved in this lawsuit. And if NASCAR was to take the charters away altogether, they basically would have been a massive, devastating blow for all those teams, and I think you would have had a lot more lawsuits than just a 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit. You probably have a very similar lawsuit to what's going on with Legacy and Rick Ware Racing, which we're going to talk about in another video coming out later today with the Rick Ware Racing lawsuit that's happening at this particular moment right now. I'm very interested to see how things are going to go as time progresses and goes on, and we'll see as more information does get leaked out, but I think there's going to be a lot of things coming out. We're in that discovery process right now, and I think there's some teams that are probably frustrated with NASCAR at this point, and probably with 2011 in Front Row. The judge has basically stated multiple times that I really like this judge, because he basically kind of said, and he's being very blunt and honest by basically saying, look, you guys are continuing to act like little children at this point, and I feel that this stuff could be settled out of court. He said go to arbitration, go to settlement. He wants all that to happen and go to mediation at this point. So, which the teams have said we may be able to go to mediation if NASCAR meets with our terms, which the other side has said we could go to mediation, but we are not going to agree to those terms. Obviously, the charter situation with the unknowns of what's going to happen with the charters, people like Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, Riley Herbst, Shane Smith, Noah Gragson, and the Front Row's charters, among other things, 2012 Michael Jordan, all that good stuff. We'll talk about that in the future, but there's uncertainty around that at this time too. As more information does come out with the lawsuit, we'll cover this on the channel as time progresses and goes on, but it's pretty big that more information continues to be revealed in regards to the 2011 and Front Row lawsuit, and it's pretty big stuff that came out today, in my honest opinion. So, that is going to today's Lawn NASCAR News and Motorsports News episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about the non-suing teams required to share some financial information for the lawsuit? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about some other stuff like Niss Motorsports not switching over to the ramp program, and also the news on Hendrick getting a pretty big penalty? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There is going to be another NASCAR news video dropping in a couple hours from now. We're also going to have reactions to NASCAR Cup Series qualifying from Atlanta, depending on the weather. And we also should have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race review from Atlanta, depending on what happens with the weather, because the weather is a little bit finicky for this weekend. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have the Truck Series race review and the Cup Series race review as well from Lime Rock and Atlanta. We got content coming on people like Haley Deegan, Shaman, Gizburgen, Cards, Kerbush, Cobblish, Ball Walls, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Cletus Afaro, Dodge, Ram, Connor Sillich, Carson Quaffle, Junior Motorsports, Kyle Larson, Ryan Priest, Brad Kozlowski, all the good stuff, Red Bull, you name it. We'll talk about all this stuff on the channel coming days and weeks. There's also silly season predictions more than likely coming on Sunday, so expect that on the channel very, very soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.